Do you feel that you sometimes put your foot in your mouth, that sometimes you react too much and respond too little, and you're not sure what to do about it? Well, in this video, we're going to take a look at the tree brains and what effect they have on your responses and how you can use modern psychology to help you respond more and react less. So, what's this thing about tree brains, Dermot? I hear you ask. Okay. Well, obviously, we have one brain, but it's also three brains. We have here, as you can see in this diagram here, we have this part here is called the brainstem, which is also known as the reptilian brain with instincts and urges. Then we have this emotional brain, which is called the limbic brain, and then the neocortex, okay? Here's a nice description. You see the little video here? So this is the reptilian brain, which is like reacting to things. This is the limbic system, the emotional brain, emotions. And then we have the neocortex, okay, which is the high level thing, which is huge, really. And just like, like many things in life, like how you build a building, you have a foundation and you build up from the foundation. Or with computers, they tend to have an operating system and build upwards on top of the operating system. The same thing, this is the basic brain, like an iguana, for example. A small lizard will have a brain like this. And then, of course, you have the emotional sides built up as man moved into a sort of tribal culture. And then the higher society into the higher thinking, okay? So the reptilian brain first appeared 500 million years ago, apparently, okay? And it's continued to develop over time. So we actually have three brains. And let's see what the difference is. The reptilian brain is the oldest of the three. It controls the body's vital functions such as heart rate, breathing, body temperature, and balance. The reptilian brain includes the main structures found in the reptilian's brain, the brainstem and the cerebellum. The reptilian's brain is reliable but tends to be somewhat rigid and compulsive. So things like keeping your heart going when you're sleeping, keeping your breathing going when you're sleeping. When you learn to drive, it's actually the reptilian brain that does the driving. So it's a useful brain, but it's the habitual brain and it's a reactive brain. Then we have the limbic brain, which emerged in mammals. It can record memories of behaviors that produce agreeable and disagreeable experiences. So it's responsible for what we call emotions in human beings. The main structures of the limbic brain are the hippocampus, which is really for memories, and the amygdala, which is basically working out what to do next, basically, and the hypothalamus, which is basic regulation of the body. The limbic brain is the seat of value judgments that we make, often unconsciously, that exert such a strong influence on our behavior, okay? This is the brain.mcgill.ca. It's a very good website in brains. And you can always donate if you like. This is run by donations. The neocortex first assumed importance in primates, that's apes, and culminated in the human brain with its two large cerebral hemispheres that play such a dominant role. These hemispheres have been responsible for the development of human language, abstract thought, imagination, and consciousness. The neocortex is flexible and has almost infinite learning abilities. Think about that for a second. The neocortex is also as enables human culture to develop. Okay, so if we take a look now at the amygdala, this is very interesting. And in case you think I'm maybe throwing a lot of brain science, you're just telling in there, it's going to explain why we tend to react. The amygdala and its allies. The amygdala is a brain structure that is essential for decoding emotions and particular stimuli that are threatening to the organism. As a result of evolution, many of our body's alarm circuits are grouped together in the amygdala. Consequently, many sensory inputs converge in the amygdala in the form of potential danger. So basically, it has to decide where to send the inputs. And we have down here the two pathways of fear, okay? So let's just go back here for a second. Yeah. So basically, this is, I think, a very good analogy for life, really. This is the instinctive side, the side that's focused on surviving. And this is the higher level thinking, and this is the emotions, okay? So that's basically the biology of the brain. But if we just think as an analogy, it's not exactly accurate, but just symbolically, okay? We can think of terms that human beings are stuck between the higher and the lower, okay? The lower self is all about survival. The higher self is more about philosophy. And it's this emotional side, the ego, the emotional side, that chooses where we go. Now, don't take that literally. This is not a direct. If you get into brain science, they'll talk in different ways. But I just think the analogy of an interim structure and then a lower structure and a higher structure. Don't take it too seriously. But basically, limbic system is deciding whether you go into thinking at a high level or going back to survival mode, reacting mode. Okay, and reaction has its useful point as well, because when we react, I mean, if somebody pulls out in front of you in the road, applying the brakes in your car might save your life. So reacting can be good. Okay, so let's take a look at this. There is two pathways of fear. So one way is something happens, and the thalamus then sends this over to the sensory cortex, which has to think about it. Then it chats to the hippocampus, which has visual and emotional memories. And then it goes back to the amygdala. And then the amygdala decides the emotional response. So let's say, for example, you haven't been on a bicycle for a long time. And you hop onto the bicycle. And you start thinking, is it safe to be on the bicycle? You're a bit wobbly. Is it safe to be on the bicycle? So you start thinking about it. Then you start having happy memories of being on the bicycle as a kid. And then the amygdala decides, oh, am I going to go back to this? Am I going to focus on here or there? So instead, it's happy memory. Focus on this. Oh, all the joys of cycling, all the joys. Oh, fantastic. Okay. Now, this one over here. Okay. Now, but let's say something happens, like somebody suddenly pulls across you in a car. Well, it goes straight to the amygdala. Amygdala just goes straight to the brainstem, goes react, put on the brakes. Okay. So this is like the emergency escape button. All right. But here's the problem is that let's say somebody pulls across you and your reaction is to have great anger and you get road rage. You skipped the sensory cortex. You skipped the higher level thinking, went straight to the reactionary thinking. And this is what we tend to do when we react. And the problem with the brain is the brain does not know the difference between physical reality and psychical reality. For all it knows, when somebody pulled across you and you got angry at them and jumped off your bike or car and start beating them up, for it knows, maybe that's a dangerous lion, a tiger, a dangerous, enemy, and you have to fight into the death. Instead, it's just some dude or some girl or somebody in their car or their bike, maybe driving like a jerk, in your opinion, maybe not, and you just going bananas. Okay, because if somebody cuts you up, I mean, jumping out of your vehicle and punching them stuff is definitely an overreaction. Let's face it. Okay, so this is the problem: is our brain, and I think this is a really good analogy for what we have in all life situations, is the tendency to react and go back to the survival thing. And there's something you have to understand here as well, which is fight and flight. Okay, so basically, fight or flight is that our brain is wired to either run after the wild animal like the tiger with a spear and kill it, or run away from it. To run after the enemy and kill the enemy, or to run away from the enemy. And the problem is when we go back to living at this level here, it puts us into this very negative space whereby we're just reacting all the time and we're aggressive, okay? And the brain has a thing called neuroplasticity, so that the brain starts reacting in a way and it gets used to being like that. It gets used to being like, if you take somebody in a war situation, you get used to this kind of thing and they start reacting like this. And this is one of the challenges when people come back from, say, a war zone, is that somebody, say, taps them on the shoulder and next thing they hit the guy or just throw him to the ground and start choking him or something, or take their gun out. They just totally overreact because they're triggered to be like that, okay? So this is basically the problem, all right? So what can we do about it? Well, I think there's some interesting stuff we can do with brain chemistry. Okay, I thought this is good. This is a website called executiveexcellence.com. You can check it out. I like the exercises that they have in this, actually. It's good. And so they basically quote here from book. I'll show you now. Daniel Goleman, author of Emotional Intelligence. So I just like the points they make, okay? And I think it's a good explanation. And that's why today we're bouncing across websites. So I think this is a good explanation, okay? And this is why we're bouncing around these websites, because they give some nice explanations. Our brains are made up of three parts. The first and oldest, the brainstem, is responsible for the body's basic operating functions like breathing and heartbeat. Next comes the limbic system, where the amygdala are located. The amygdala activate during times of stress. They're responsible for fight or flight response that keeps us alive since the days of the cavemen. Now, when the amygdala are triggered by stress, they race into action. First, they signal the brain stem to release adrenaline and cortisol. Now, adrenaline and cortisol is these are fight or flight hormones. And the adrenaline makes you kind of hyper, makes you very good at, you'll be able to take pain without feeling pain too much. You'll be able to punch the other guy in the teeth, makes you very aggressive. Cortisol is a stress hormone. Also, endomorphins will get released as well by this. And basically, you won't feel so much pain. It helps you not go into shock after an accident. It helps you prepare to fight the other guy. It's useful. What else happens? The heart beats faster, blood pressure rises, breathing accelerates. Next, the amygdala shuts down the flow of blood into the neocortex. So you stop thinking so much. And anybody who's had the experience of being in a fight, for example, possibly also the situation of being in an accident, all the high level thinking goes out the window. And this is also why when we hear cases of, an intruder goes into a house and the person shoots them, and next thing they end up in court for murder, and people say, oh, he took the gun out and shot him, therefore it's murder. If you think about it logically, it's very questionable, because that person probably isn't thinking rationally, because once they're in that situation, this high level philosophical thinking of right and wrong goes out the window. And you can see why, that we're going back down to the brainstem basically, and there's not so much of a focus on the neocortex. Because if you're just think of it logically, if you're in a survival situation, especially say war, battles, violence, you really don't have time for high level philosophical thinking. Well, it will slow you down and it will get in your way. So here's the important point. Okay, he says here you get a thing called amygdala hijack. Okay, and this is very, very important. He says here, it doesn't matter that somebody cuts you up in traffic, we can lose the ability to reason. Okay, so our brain doesn't know what's happening externally, it just knows the stimulus that you've been stressed. Okay, so it says here, we get triggered by the same way when we are in a stressful meeting or when we replay memories of a stressful event. Adrenaline and cortisol flood the body. What's worse is that these stress hormones can stay in the body for up to 4 hours, which is why it would be amped up long after the stressful situation. This is called the amygdala hangover, okay? And also, if you get into a stressful situation on a daily basis, for example, it's very bad because you can get a thing called adrenaline burnout, because your body's supposed to have this like cortisol and adrenaline for small periods of time, like an hour or two here or there. Not like hours and hours and hours. In our modern society, it's very easy to be stressed out for hours and hours and hours and hours, and your body be pumping cortisol and adrenaline for hours and hours and hours and hours, which are very unhealthy, Okay, so the thing is, if you get back to brain plasticity, is your brain gets used to being triggered, and it just takes a small little thing to put you back into that space. So is there a way to deal with the amygdala hijack? So what we're calling about the amygdala hijack is basically that the person has kind of gone to a situation because of their experience and their perceptions. They keep going back to, have to fear, have to be reacting, fear, stress, react. So it's going down here, it's not going up here. So the amygdala keeps sending us down to here, and our brain keeps thinking away that anything stimulates us to go down to here, back into fear, okay? And let's clarify something here. When we talk about fear, it's not necessarily that someone's going to beat you up, but let's say just daily life stresses, okay? Okay, let's take a look here again. So I will give a little explanation here, okay? 1, recognizing your triggers. This is a good explanation, I think. If you get easily triggered at work, especially when you're meeting with the same people each week, this is an excellent opportunity to practice. You might start by going to the meeting, getting upset, staying upset for a day or two before you realize you were triggered. The next week you go to the meeting, you get upset, and stay that way until you get home and the evening before you realize you've been triggered. The next week, you're in the meeting and you start to feel the chest tighten and blood pressure rise just before you get upset. You'll still get upset, but you notice what's happening to your body, okay? Progress. This is important. So a lot of the time people are stressed, but they don't know they're stressed. And what he's kind of saying here is you can be in a situation whereby you're actually being traumatized, but you don't realize you're being traumatized. And if you start observing it, you can start realizing, oh, I'm being traumatized. Oh, I'm being triggered. So before you get triggered, if you can start realizing you're on the way to it, you can prevent it. So for example, if you've ever had a situation where you look at, say, somebody who's doing a really bad road rage incident, do you really believe for 1 minute that they were perfectly normal 5 minutes ago and then suddenly they went from zero to thermonuclear? Probably not. More than likely, I think what happens is these people have had maybe a fight with their wife, a fight with a husband, their parents, their kids, the boss. It's been building up. And maybe over a period of days, weeks, months, even years, they're getting more and more stressed. And then the small thing makes them blow over. It's a bit like when it rains a lot, the water table rises, and then even a small amount of rain results in flooding. Well, it's the same thing with mental emotional stress. That when we get more and more stress, it's like our emotional water table is high, and any little thing can make it spill over. So the first thing to recommend here at good old executiveexcellence.com is to recognize when you're triggered. The second thing is to fire up your neocortex. Once you recognize you're being triggered in the moment, you can move to step 2. Thomas Jefferson once said, if you get mad, count to 10. If you get really mad, count to 100. This sounds simplistic, but it actually has the effect that you need to counter amygdala hijack. When you count, you re-engage the neocortex that was shut off just seconds ago. Counter will give you the ability to reassess, access logic, and will build the distance you need to see things more clearly. Okay, so maybe counting to 100 in a fight situation would not be a good idea, or even a road rage incident. But if you get back to something I was mentioning in the previous video, which is kind of linked to this one, which is response versus reaction, I mentioned it, the pause, okay? And the pause is giving yourself a chance to respond rather than react, okay? So the famous guy, I quoted the other video as well, Viktor Frankl, he was a Holocaust survivor, and he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. Let's have a look at his famous quotation here. Between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose a response. In a response lies our growth and our freedom. So between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose a response. In a response lies our growth and our freedom. So that little space, and remember, this is a guy, he's just getting road rage. He's like in a concentration camp. I mean, I can't think of anything more stressful. And yet he noticed that that little moment of a pause can give him opportunities to be proactive and choose rather than react, respond rather than react. So same thing, if you just pause for a second, and maybe counting, for example, might help you just to reboot your thinking brain again, okay? Because you're in a situation and it's very easy to descend. And I think we've all been in the situation now and again in our life whereby we're starting to lose it, and we're starting to get triggered, and we're just turning into a shouting match, and we're starting to say and do things which are not good and are not going to help, okay? Just for a moment, hold back, okay? That's firing the neocortex. Number 3 is switch your attention. Take long, intentional breaths. Again, it sounds simplistic, but when you bring attention repeatedly to each breath, you have it. You activate the parasympathetic system. Remember, when we get excited, we tend to hyperventilate. We breathe too quickly. So the parasympathetic system, that's part of your nervous system responsible for rest and digest. Take deep, mindful breaths will have a net result to bring you back to a calm state. So 3 things there is recognize when you're triggered, fire up your neocortex, and switch your attention. Also on this subject, I thought this is another nice site called the Ann Shipard MD. And she talks about the limbic loop, which is the same thing. And she gives some ideas about it. She mentions things like a diet that's high in sugars or refined carbs is not good. And that your chemicals and so on. What else advice does she give? She gives these tools, but I can't comment because I don't know. DNRS wire, ANS wire. You can look at her website, Ann Shipard, MD. Know the root cause of limbic loop, the missing piece of the healing puzzle? I'm not sure. I don't want to talk about something I don't know about. But what I can show you think is useful is her advice here about nutrition is important, okay? So things like daily probiotics, which help to gut, brain axis, support overall health. Glycine is an amino acid that is calming. Magnesium glycine, I actually take this and I take some L-taurine with it, so you get magnesium taurine, which is good for heart. And magnesium glycinate provides essential mineral magnesium, helps to calm the nervous system. And she says here that she finds most patients are low. And the reality is pretty much most people over the age of 40 are low in magnesium. So magnesium is very useful for health, okay? So these are just basic things that we should be looking at. Okay. Okay. What else can we add to this as well? Well, what we could also add to this is, yeah, she has that here as well. She talks about Zen meditation, and I think meditation is very useful. There's a meditation system that I'm involved in. I've been there for many years, called heartfulness.org. It's free. It's an energetic meditation system. You receive energy into the heart, and it grounds you. So meditation is a really, really good practice. You can go to any meditation system you like. If you like, you can check this one out, heartfulness.org. It's an Indian Raja yoga system of meditation, and it is free. So it's free to attend. Will my webpage load? I do not know, but that's the URL, heartfulness.org, okay? Try it out, okay? It's very, very useful, all right? So let's take a look here. So why would you bother with meditation? Well, the thing is, getting back to this thing of triggering, your brain gets wired a certain way, and you can actually rewire your brain. It's called neuroplasticity. And meditation is one very useful way of rewiring your brain. Your brain gets used to being more calm. And the one thing I would say about meditation is meditation should be a daily practice. And I think anything that's a daily practice will start having effect on your neuroplasticity. I mean, these days people complain about too many people watching mobile phones. And that's an example of negative side of neuroplasticity, of hot wiring our brain to need this constant, I have to keep hitting the phone all the time. I have to keep checking my updates. This is the opposite. This is your checking with your heart, checking with your emotions, checking with your true self, ground yourself. And it's really on the principle that, inside the heart is the center, and you're grounding yourself in your center, you're centering yourself, okay? So just to finally finish up here, in the previous video, which if you've got a chance, you can check it out, which is response versus reaction. I talk about why it's important to respond rather than react, and I talk about the pause and how we should really give ourselves that pause. In this video, what I want to talk about is that, the reason why you are this way, the reason why you are overreacting is because the three brains and everything in our society, more or less everything, has a tendency of putting us down here. And if you look at description of the limbic system, it talks about breathing and stuff, but it's also in general the fear reaction. So, things like I haven't enough, I can't pay the bills, I don't have health insurance, what am I going to do? I'm going to lose my job, coronavirus, whatever it is. Fear, stress, tension. We keep getting put into fear. And you needless to say, up here, you're going to get into abundance. You're going to get the higher level thinking, the philosophical thinking, okay? So you might be wondering how to get back there. And as the Executive Excellence website was suggesting, number one is to try and become aware that you're triggered. Number two is this thing of refiring the neocortex. And number three is deep breathing. We can also add a fourth one, which is meditation. And a fifth, which is balanced lifestyle, like do some exercise, take some supplements, eat a healthy diet. So there's always a baseline of things which you have to do to balance out your health, okay? So in the previous video, I talked more about the high level thinking, the philosophical things we can think about that will help us, get into a pause situation. And here in this video, I just wanted to talk about the wiring of the brain and why it is that you're getting stuck in this fear reaction. And how you get out of it is through self-awareness, which is something I talk a lot about in this channel. Breathing, reactivating the neocortex, meditation, and a good diet and rest and a lifestyle with healthy recreational, not too much stress. And I'll be adding a video on stress very soon as well. So I just thought that would help you realize, because we have to understand as human beings that the way our brain is wired has a big effect on us. We are not just a consciousness, we're a consciousness in the brain, and our brain is wired a certain way. But fortunately, we can also rewire our brain, okay? Hope that helps you. Please like and subscribe. I'll talk to you next time.